Today's presentations will be about DeepSeek. I have to make a caveat first. I'm not expert in AI. I'm not a developer, but I pay attention to this AI for quite some time now. I think over the past few days, also spent quite a bit of time to understand what happened with this DeepSeek, right? And then it seems that it has quite a big impact to the market. So I think it's worth to spend some time to go and figure out what's going on, right? Yesterday, market dropped really a lot. Nvidia dropped 17%, and then Microsoft 2%, Google 4%. The one that's doing quite well was Apple 3%, which is the company that didn't really spend too much money buying Nvidia GPUs. So it seems that there's one camp that is like really Nvidia camp, right? They are their customers. And then the other camp is like stay away like Apple. So those are the ones that did well. So quite interesting. Okay, Nvidia down how many percent? 17%. I think this is from Bloomberg article. It shows that Nvidia just one day, right? It down 589 billions of market cap. So this is like, another new record. But if you look at the records, right, out of like top 9, right, how many of them are Nvidia? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7. It just shows that this company, number one, is super big in terms of market cap. Number two is that the stock price is very volatile. I believe, let's say if you just swap it to the biggest single day jump, right, I think Nvidia also is on top now. So this is just, we all recognize that the market cap is big. So just a few percentage move, this market cap can swing a lot. But for Nvidia, still 17% looks like it is like a small cap, right? So quite interesting. Although I say it, right, I'm not a developer, I'm not AI expert, but what my positions, right, is that I'm Nvidia shareholders and I invested in this company since 2020. Currently, I hold 1,000 shares. Today's market value is $121,000. It is still my largest holding. That's why I've been following this company for quite some time, and I think I know about this company more than average persons who just like new or just invested in these companies less than, let's say, a few years, right? So this is my positions at the moment. And then yesterday, because of all this 70% drop, all this news, right? And it's not just one company, right? A few other companies that's in my holdings also affected. So one day, my portfolio actually down by $49,000. Usually, let's say if there's something that's really concerning, right? Sometimes I also panic, although I don't panic sell that easily, but I also concerned, right? But this round, right, actually surprisingly, I'm not concerned at all. Later, I will go through the reasons why I think this DeepSeek crash, right, is really not something that we should be concerned about now. So this is the two papers. So just to give you some context about DeepSeek, right? So there are AI companies doing large language model, and they are rather new. In fact, this company that create DeepSeek model, right, they are quant fund, meaning that they are trying to use mathematics model to invest and to try to, I think they try to become like a renaissance tech, right? And then maybe there's some crackdown on inside China, so they just pivot and get into all this AI stuff, large language model. So there are two papers. The most recent one is 26th of December, where they released the technical report about the V3 model. And then the one that is really, caught attentions, right, is the one that was released on 23rd of January. So just 5 days ago. So this is the R1 models. So there are only these two papers that you should pay attention to. But if you really want to talk about the details of the model in terms of the innovations, right, actually you need to go back even further, right? Like, for example, read about the V2 technical reports and so on. But these two models, right, you can think of it as the R1 is the ChatGPT 01 model, and the V3 is the ChatGPT 4.0 models. They are about the same level. Okay, I won't go through the technical about this, but you need to know slightly, a little bit about this DeepSeek in order to process like what's the implications to the market, right? So two things to remember about this DeepSeek model. Number one, they are seriously good. Okay, so although people say that China can be like try to boast about their capability, try to paint a picture, try to do a lot of gimmicks, but this time, right, DeepSeek model, right, we just have to recognize that the model is really good. It's really on par with ChatGPT. Okay, this is number one. The one that is even more surprising is not just about the quality, it's about the cost. So for those who don't know about the cost, right? So let's say if you have a API and then you run inferencing on this DeepSeek model, right? So depending on how large is the model, the memory requirement and so on, so there will be a cost associated, right? So if you look at the cost, right, this is a comparisons of R1, which is their best model, versus OpenAI 01 model. You can see that the price difference is not like 2 times or 3 times. It's actually like 20 or 30 times. Just look at, let's say, the input tokens, right, is $15 versus 0.14. That's about like 10x difference. So they really have a lot of like all these innovative trick to scale down the model, or maybe scale down the model is not a good description. So basically they have some innovations to actually make the model's requirement a lot lower. Then they can run this at a cheaper cost. So this is the one that is surprising, because for all the other large language model, right? Say for example Llama, Cloud, or Gemini, or ChatGPT, right? You really need like all these expensive machines from Nvidia to run it. Now suddenly this DeepSeek model came out, right? They say that we don't need all these expensive machines. We can run on those like second tier, lower spec, but still able to come up with the quality that's as good as OpenAI models. That's why the market is really shocked by this. It's about the cost. So this is the more, I would say this is even more impactful as compared to the quality, because the quality wise is just on par with ChatGPT. It's not like 5x better, right? So this is about the cost. Okay, so then why suddenly just AI company come up with a model that is very cheap, then suddenly the whole market tank, right? So if you just read the headlines, you know that the narrative is about like, okay, what's going to happen to Nvidia GPU? Because for those, like Nvidia, right? There's this impression that all these AI companies, they really need to keep buying the best model to able to run the models, because in order to run such a high quality model, high quality response, you need expensive machines, right? That's where the value is from. All these companies needs the expensive hardware. Now suddenly people realize that, actually you don't need expensive machines. You don't need expensive GPU. You just need to be clever about your modeling, and then you can just save tons of costs. So if that's the case, everyone buy the cheaper machines and is still able to run, then who needs the expensive machines, right? So that's why people are starting to projecting a lower demand for Nvidia GPUs, and this entire AI seems like like a dream or something like an imagination that's just push. It's gone now. So how markets need to adjust this new expectation, right? That's why market crash. So basically that's the narrative. And if you scroll through Twitter, you will see that now all the FUD starts to come out, right? Fear, uncertainty, and doubt, right? So people start to say that you see, Nvidia could find itself in a situation already similar to what Cisco faced after the dot-com bubble burst in the early 2000s. Cisco was a dominant supplier of networking equipment, riding a wave of massive demand as startup and tech companies scrambled to build internet infrastructure. So basically Cisco is the provider of all this network, right? So back in 2000s bubbles, after that they just pop, right? If let's say Nvidia following Cisco footstep, right? What it means is that everything about AI now is just a bubble that's going to pop. That's why there's a market kind of reacted quite a big way because of this so-called the new expectations. If you just read the headlines, basically that's the the gist. Okay. Then what's my take, right? I tweeted this yesterday. So basically, just to simplify it, right? If you don't want to listen to all the details about my presentations, right? Just remember these memes, right? Basically, those who don't think much, they just think very simply. Or on the left-hand side, right? They just looking at market. Market is red, down 17%. It's cheap. So just buy the dip. But it's the majority on the middle that are thinking, I'm start to worrying. DeepSeek market crash, Nvidia demand will drop. So, but anyway, US is overvalued. Valuation multiple is so high, so must going to crash 20, 30, 50%. The average persons will be in between, right? The majority start to worry. But those who really know, right? You really study DeepSeek, and then you really study what's the implications, and you know how this AI trend will play, right? Actually, you will fall on the right-hand side, which is, the cool guy, just market rate, just buy the dip. So basically, that's what I feel right now on these market reactions. So either you think simply or you do a lot of analysis, you tend to end up with the same conclusions. And I hope that I'm able to influence you to skew towards the right-hand sides. Okay, so that's my aim. Okay, first thing, this is also my tweets. So I just want to say that some people don't know. They thought that this DeepSeek come out and then Nvidia is being competed away. So basically, this is really not true, right? Because if you look at the value chain, right, there are, all the fab equipment suppliers like ASML, there are fabs like TSMC, they just manufacture chips. And then there are companies like Nvidia, who is providing the platforms, like CUDA platforms. They provide all this GPU for these AI companies to build their large language models, right? So this is Nvidia is at the third layer. And then on top of all this CUDA and running on GPU is the large language models. So we are talking about like ChatGPT, we're talking about OpenAI, Llama, including DeepSeek. This is really like the large language models providers, right? So right now, let's say DeepSeek is very good. So they are actually competing with companies like OpenAI, Meta, Llama, and so on. So they are not directly competing with Nvidia. Okay, so this one you need to remember, because even for those machines, right, they are using Nvidia machines to run their training and inference. So this one, just to tell you that Nvidia is still dominant. If someone suddenly come up with their own chip and then you can bypass Nvidia and then just do a fantastic LLM without Nvidia, right, then I will start to worry. But right now, it seems that this entire chain, right, Nvidia's place at the third layer here is still solid. It is like, so far, we are not talking about like competitors that trying to grab the opportunity from Nvidia. We're talking about the competitions at the applications at the LLM level. So it is really like operating at different level. So this is my first point. And then talking about the demand, right? Satya Nadella, Microsoft CEO, he just mentioned that Jevons paradox strikes again. As AI gets more efficient and accessible, we will see its use skyrocket, turning it into commodity we just can't get enough of. So basically, I know there are people who are concerned or who think that, okay, now you just need low-end GPUs and you're still able to run good stuff, right? Then why do you need to buy, let's say, like the Blackwell chips, right? So confirm the overall demand will come down, right? So this is basically what they're thinking about. I'm not saying that this is entirely false. There are some truth in it, because let's say if you just buy a cheap GPU and you're still able to run, really there's no need to buy the expensive one. But I would say that this is the first level thinking. But if you think about it, right, if all this LLM is really so accessible, right, then really the use, right, it will be really skyrocket, because there are many people, many products, they can't really scale it just because all these things is very expensive. Even let's say for you and I, let's say if you subscribe to ChatGPT, right, even if you pay, let's say $20, I mean, we could be subsidized by OpenAI, you know, because running inferencing right now is still quite expensive. In order for all this, you know, ChatGPT and LLM to really gain wide adoptions, right, you need the price to come down. And how price come down, there are many ways, right? They could be scaling in terms of the hardware, they could be scaling in terms of software. Now what we are observing with DeepSeek is just that now just with all this LLM, right, they are able to really scale it on the software side and have really, really good results using a lot lesser compute. So I think that's good things, right? Because you need to think of it from aggregate perspective. As demand skyrocket, right, it will really offset the drop in compute that we get from all these efficiency gains. So basically that's what Jevons paradox is talking about. I know this is a bit abstract. That's why I pull some examples just to illustrate this concept a bit more, because I think this Jevons paradox, this is quite important. The first one, right, is that, you know, last time, right, people are using tungsten light bulbs, right? Then, you know, there are different types, right? Kerosene, incandescence, fluorescence. And then now I think all of us using LED, right? So the question is that as we move to a new type of, you know, light bulbs, right, which is a lot more efficient, does that actually increase or reduce the overall electricity to just power up all this light? The aggregate demand is actually larger. So this one is not just speculations. Really, there are some research that talk about this, and really the aggregate demand went up after all these efficient LED light bulbs invented and become widely adopted. So this is one example. The other one is fuel efficient vehicles. You know, last time, right, all these cars, right, they are really not fuel efficient one. Every year there's some innovations in terms of engines and in terms of all sort of things. So it become a lot more efficient at fuel consumptions. Not talking about electric vehicles. This is talking about fuel consumption. But again, the aggregate fuel consumptions, right, actually went up after all these, you know, fuel efficient vehicles came out. So this is another example. And then the third one is cloud computing and data centers. So you think of it like cloud computing is basically if you have the same hardware, right, because we are using access to cloud, you access to cloud, I access to cloud, we are actually sharing the machines that sit somewhere in the servers, right? So it makes the use a lot more efficient. What happened is that just because all these things is cheap, right, everyone is using more of it. Say for example, let's say if you use cloud storage, right, if it is very cheap, you just put your stuff inside, you know, cloud storage, and then you just take photo, it just sync to your cloud storage, right? Then you just continue to use without thinking about, oh, you need to save on space, right? So you just keep on using more and more of it, right? So aggregate demand actually increase even after all these efficiency gains. So I think this is a few examples that I think quite important, because if you study in enough, right, I'll say that what happened with all these LLM efficiency gains, right, it just means that the adoption will skyrocket. This is especially true given that as of today, right, in terms of number of people using LLM on daily basis, right, it's still very, very low. You can just ask around. Let's say you ask your parents, you ask your children, or you ask your friends, how many of them like use all these LLM on daily basis? Because we are still not used to it, right? And because in terms of the number of services that is available, that is powered by all these LLM, is still limited, and it is limited because of the cost. So we really need the cost to come down, then it will be widely adopted. Another example is all this air travel, right? The efficiency actually improve over time, although it's a slow improvement. If you look at the chart on the left-hand side, right, it's showing that every decade there are some improvement. Maybe if you track 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, you don't see it. But as you track like decades, right, you can see that the efficiency keep going up. But if you look at the total consumptions of fuel, right, also go up. As it becomes cheaper, right, people travel more. It's as simple as that. So I think these are a few examples that tell you that, okay, this Jevons paradox, right, is not just some theory that we all hope that it will be true. There are many cases. You just study things that takes time to gain adoptions, right? You will notice that the aggregate demand is really going up, and that will offset the efficiency gains. So just to conclude, right, all these AI companies, they still need tons of compute. They need tons of compute to make their model better. They need tons of compute for inferencing. And then later I'll talk about the change of thought, inferencing, right, which will improve the quality a lot. And that one also will increase the demands for compute. So they all still need Nvidia GPUs. So no need to worry about. So basically that's the gist of today's presentations. The upcoming 5 or 6 slides, right, is talking about this blog written by Jeffrey Emanuel. I would strongly recommend you to read the blog. I think it's a very good one. Even if you are not interested with DeepSeek, just reading the blog, I think it gives you a good overview about what's going on with the LLM and the dynamics and the updates at today's situations. I think it's a very good read. So at the start, he talked about his personal background. So, there are people who are very good with technology. There are others people that are very good with investing. But it just happened that he's good at both technology and investing. So that's why he think that he wanted to share about his knowledge in this area. And the blog, right, is really titled The Short Case for Nvidia Stock. So that's actually why I'm interested to read about it. So I'll go through some summary of what he talked about in his blog. If you read through the blog, right, I think it will take like, let's say, almost 1 hour to read through. It's quite a long blog, almost like a short book already. Okay, he start, right, on this blog, right, is really talking about like Nvidia unprecedented rise. Okay, the bull case everyone knows. Okay, so he doesn't start with talking about like, Nvidia is a company that cannot make it, it's a bubble. It's not like that. It's really like recognizing what is so good about Nvidia. Okay, so monopoly-like status in AI infrastructure, explosive capex from Microsoft, Meta, Google, Amazon, etc. Insane 90% plus gross margin on high-end data center GPU, paradigm shifting potential of AI to transform industry. And if you look at the chart on the bottom, right, it just skyrocket to about $3.5 trillion market cap. I think after the crash, it came down a bit. So this is recording before the yesterday crash. People knows Nvidia is good. Okay, now let's talk about the competitive landscape. So there's a convergence of threats. So a few things, right? First one, emerging hardware challenges. We won't go into the details, but just remember these names are Cerebras and Grok. Big tech custom silicon initiatives, Google TPU, Amazon Trainium. Software abstraction frameworks, MLX, Triton, JX. Efficiency breakthrough, reducing AI compute requirements. So these are the, like the few key points. We'll get into more details, okay? The first one, let's talk about the hardware threat first. Innovative approaches redefining hardware. Cerebras, wafer scale chips eliminate Nvidia interconnect advantage. Okay, so you just look at the bottom picture there, right? For Nvidia GPU, right, the size, right, is this very small GPU here. For Cerebras, right, their chip is giant chip. It's like really a big chip. How come, like, if you just compare the size, you would think that, then is that means that Cerebras chip will be a lot better? Okay, so there's a lot of technical discussion here. I won't go into like the technical side because I also not expert in this. But just to let you know that for Nvidia GPUs, right, the size isn't that big, but they have to connect all these chips all together. So they have all this interconnect to make them actually connected together because you need all this GPU to work in sync when it comes to AI model trainings. So it's really like, pieced together. So if you have all this strong GPU, but you are not able to, like interconnect them together, right, then you are not able to train all these, like super large models. So that's their approach. So for this Cerebrus, right, their approach, right, they know that in order to have all this high quality interconnect, right, is also a form of capabilities, right. Instead of like creating their interconnect, they straight away like just make a giant chip and they just bypass this problem about interconnect. They don't need that. Just a giant chip alone provide a lot of compute already and able to hold all this memory and so on. So this is kind of like innovative ways to come up with highly performant chips, basically. So this is Cerebrus. And then for Grok, right, this one I won't go into the details because I also don't know. But they use different type of technology. They call it like a deterministic compute optimized for AI inference, right? But I just know that they are not big in training. They are really focusing on just inferencing. The good thing is that when it comes to inferencing, the compute is really good. I actually use API on this Grok before. It's really very fast one. They just type out very fast, much faster as compared to ChatGPT. But the bad thing about Grok is that they have to do a lot of things to fit one model. And let's say if you just change to another model, right? So they have a lot of all these initial costs to just fit their chip to another new model. So that's why Grok, they have their problems. But if you just focus about inferencing and just focus on just one specific model, right, they have some potential, and I believe that they will eat up some market share from Nvidia in the future. But right now, it's still like, in terms of the tractions, right, still very limited tractions for these two companies. It's still early. Then custom silicon also, I think it's still early. There are announcements. For example, like Amazon one, I think the Trainium chip, right, I think they have a sizable cluster there. But in terms of like market share, I don't think they have taken any sizable market shares from Nvidia. Nvidia is still taking a large market shares. But anyway, just tell you that Nvidia is not like the only one chip provider when it comes to AI training. There are other competitors. They are doing different things and they are trying to eat the market shares. Whether they successfully in this pursuit, still don't know. You just have to watch. But just to tell you that there are competitions. Okay, so this is the competition on the hardware side. Then let's talk about the competitions on the software side. So the first one, high-level framework reducing reliance on CUDA. TinyGrad initiative rewriting AMD drivers for AI. So this TinyGrad, right, I don't know. I think they are like some third party. They call themselves like just a software companies that's doing all this driver stuff for AMD, because we all know that AMD, right, in terms of GPU, they are able to create good GPU to the extent as good as Nvidia. The problem is that they don't have good interconnect, and then second thing is that they don't have all the necessary software like the CUDA platforms. They have their versions called the ROCm, but really in terms of the library, in terms of the richness of the ecosystems, right, it's really nowhere close to Nvidia. That's why they are not able to gain sizable market shares. But it seems that there are other companies that's trying to rewriting AMD drivers so that AMD GPU is able to run all this AI model training and inferencing. So AMD, imagine that one day their software, their ROCm platforms getting a lot better, right? They will definitely come and eat the market shares from Nvidia. Whether how good it is, it depends on the quality of all this software, because if the software is as good, right, why not people just move there, right? But the problem is that to build all this software, to build the ecosystem, all this take effort, take times. Right now, at this moment, still they are quite far away. So this is the current situations, right? The third one, potential for LLM-powered code translation to bypass CUDA. So this one, I also don't want to go into too details because I also don't know about all this. But my takeaway from this is that sometimes even if you have like all this CUDA and then you need Nvidia to run all this CUDA, right? But if you have all this LLM-powered code translations, basically you can actually just write your codes at the high level, and then just let all these large language model to do the translation for you, and then you can actually do a lower level codes to play with all this assembly stuff and just make full use of the GPU, and then you can just use, for example, AMD GPUs, right? So all this is talking about like, okay, on the software side, there's also tons of things happening to try to eat Nvidia market shares. It's just that today they are not there yet. We cannot say that tomorrow or 1 year, 5 years later, they won't, they are forever behind, right? We can't say that. Anyway, this is competitions. It will be, like ongoing. So, which is good, right? It provides more options for the consumers. And also for Nvidia, they can't say that, oh, just because today I'm good and I'm good forever, people can't get better than me. So this is definitely not true, right? Because, Nvidia, their sales is super big. Their profit margin is super big. Other competitors, right, really are aiming for this, huge gross margin. So everyone wants to eat their lunch, right? So whether they are able to do it or not, that's another story, right? Okay, then this blog also talked about the DeepSeek breakthrough, right? So this bottom table here is showing the so-called $5.6 million dollars. Only they require less than 6 million to train the models. Basically, that's the headline. But I think there's a lot of caveat to this number. The first one, let's say like OpenAI, they train their models. They really buy, spending, billions of dollars to buy Nvidia GPU to train their model. But when it comes to DeepSeek, right, the $5.6 million is actually the renting cost of the GPU. So they didn't count how much they bought, right? So that's why it looks very low. But still, when it comes to the training, right, there are a lot of things that they did in order to save the cost or run it on a more efficient level. So I think those innovations, people will learn from them. Thank God they are, like open source, right? People just learn. But I think what the blog is trying to say is that, okay, given that this DeepSeek breakthrough, right, it just shows that there's reduced aggregate demand for GPU, which we just talked about just now, right? I mean, it could be true. Who knows, right? It's just that I refuse to think it's true. And then this new scaling law, this is basically talking about the inference compute scaling. For those who are not, like very savvy on all these things, right? So this inference compute scaling basically is the O1 model and this DeepSeek R1 model, right? Basically, instead of like you prompting the model, they straight away give you the answer, right? They have this, they call the change of thought models. Basically, when they look at your questions, basically the model, right? They read your prompt, they will just throw up some ideas and they will question what are you trying to ask, and then they will just think about it and then firing up all these different conversations with itself and then just read through its own answer, right? And then just continue to think about that problem a lot longer before they really summarize the entire output and then give you a holistic answer. So basically that's the approach. But the key takeaway here is that once you use all these change of thought models, right, you will need a lot more inferencing, because in terms of the inferencing, it's not just directly look at your prompt and then this is your response, right? They actually come up with a lot of all these like self-dialogues, right? And then all this count into the inference compute. So it just talk to Excel, talk. And then, then after that, just summarize the overall conversations and then give you much higher quality output. So that's the chain of thought, right? So I do think that this new scaling law, right, this inference compute scaling, right, will increase the demand, because who don't want, high quality output? Especially like this method, right, is able to reduce the hallucinations problem by a lot. So for example, those who use, let's say like ChatGPT 4.0 models in, let's say like codes generations, right? So you still have a couple of errors if you use 4.0 model, but once you use the O1 models, right, because the O1 model, they're able to come up with the codes and then run the codes itself and then look at all this output or the error message and then go and fix the codes and do this a few times. Then only, once they are sure that, this thing is good, right, then only it provides the final codes to you. So that's why, the quality is definitely better. It's just that first thing is it takes time to run. Second thing is that it needs a lot of compute for all this extra inference. So that's the inference compute scaling. I heard that those, depending on how you, play around with the parameters, right, they are able to make the models think for 5 minutes, 10 minutes before they really come up with the final answer to you. So I think that's quite impressive. The important thing to remember is that this will be able to improve the quality and it will require a lot of compute. Just to wrap up, right, he just want to talk about like, Nvidia current valuations, right? So it is currently priced at 20x forward sales, 20x of sales, not earnings, right? So this is something to take into account. And one thing is that, their gross margin is still high. I don't know what's the current number. The chart there is showing 75 or 76% gross margin. So basically he's asking like, given that now it is this kind of valuation, you just think that if suddenly they just price at, let's say 16 forward sales, or let's say the 75% gross margin suddenly just dropped to 65%, which is still high, right? You just make some adjustment to valuations assumptions, right? Then suddenly you realize that, actually Nvidia price can actually drop quite a fair bit. So it is a questions on like the valuations, is it really like value stocks or the valuation is actually quite high, and that's why looks fragile. Potential for growth decelerations, which could be true, right? And margin compression, which also could be true. Let's say, right, they try to sell to Microsoft, they say, I have enough GPUs already. Then no one is able to pay such a high price. Then no choice, they have to lower their prices, and then the margin will compress, right? So all this is just business as usual. They will go through that at someday, right? History of market disruptions in over profitable industry. I think this is also a key point. If they are operating at, let's say, 20% margin, other competitors, right, they won't try as hard to go and get your market share because they know that even if they get your market share, their margins is not going to be very fat, right? But right now, Nvidia market share is really, really fat. So when you are earning a lot, people just want to come and eat your lunch. And whether you are able to defend it or not, that's something that we are monitoring. Just to conclude, 5 vectors of risk for Nvidia: architectural innovations by competitors, vertical integrations by customers, software abstraction framework, efficiency breakthrough like DeepSeek, manufacturing democratizations via TSMC. I think the 5th point I didn't mention. So basically, he's saying that Nvidia, they don't have their own fabs, right? They are relying on TSMC. Let's say TSMC is producing 3 nanometer right now, right? So they will be able to access 3 nanometers. Let's say another company, just take AMD for example, right? AMD, if they're able to design a good chip and they're also able to access to these 3 nanometers process nodes. So there's no modes around the process nodes. It's really like democratized by TSMC. They can only count on the software, their ecosystem to defend their castle, right? So this is also something that you need to be aware of, because imagine that, let's say if, during Intel time, right? Intel is the one that own their own fabs. Let's say if their fabs is able to come up with process nodes that is a lot more advanced compared to others, so they will just, have another mode in terms of the process nodes, right? Now, Nvidia just don't have this, right? So we just have to, accept this, right? But the software side, I think their mode is quite high, because we are not talking about like just a couple of software. We are talking about the entire ecosystem, right? So that's why I think it's still quite solid. Even though I look at all these things, right? Like hardware, other companies that's trying to do all different things, right? And then on the software side, there's also effort to try to come up with alternative to Nvidia GPUs. But I do think that this one and this one both are still, not much tractions. Because if there's traction, right, you will start to see that the market shares of Nvidia slowly to come down, right? But right now, I still don't see it, right? So that's why when we talk about DeepSeek, I'm not worried now, because if you look at their real competitions, right, which is like the software threats and the hardware threats, right, they are still limited. And DeepSeek earlier tweet, right, is really not a competition. When they are able to come up with such an efficient model, right, it will be deployed. People will be using them, and the demand will go to DeepSeek model, and still they will be powered by Nvidia GPU, right? So they don't have to worry much about this. Maybe you can worry, let's say if you say that, I don't believe, even let's say the price come down, the token price come down, people will not just adopt, right? If you think like that, then okay lah, then I mean you are right lah. So everyone just buy the cheap GPU and call it a day, right? So people don't need higher performance Blackwell chip from Nvidia, right? So you can come up with such thought process, right? But for me, I think it's quite clear. They still command huge market share just because the quality of their GPU, the entire ecosystem is really solid. Any companies that's doing AI, they still rely on Nvidia. I will close my presentation here and hope you enjoy these presentations, and please like and subscribe. Hope you enjoy this sharing. I hope everyone have a happy Chinese New Year. 恭喜发财，新年快乐，事事顺利。See you in the next one. Bye bye.